Christian and I have a shared obsession. We both believe that inner power is the core, the root of all growth in our lives. But he has made it his mission to understand this power, as well as all kinds of other power, and draw distinctions that I feel are totally fascinating. So join us as we talk about why we're afraid of power, why we don't trust ourselves to be powerful, so much more. And if you want to know his background, Christian is an award winning author, respected teacher, leader in the field of breathwork, self development, and more for 30 years. His name is, again, Christian de la Huerta. And check out his book, Awakening the Soul of Power, and his website, soulfulpower.com. And now here we go. Let's listen. Hi, I'm Summer McStravick with flowdreaming.com. And welcome to this series, Scarcity Thinking Sucks. So do limiting beliefs. So let's dissolve your limited thinking, dump those scarcity thoughts, own your power, and get you back on your feet, reaching for the stars. Over the course of these episodes, you'll hear from some really brilliant minds about ways they pinpoint and blow up limiting beliefs in their specific areas of expertise. So come with me on a journey into your mind and heart, and let's see what we can find in these very enlightening conversations. Hi, Christian. How are you today?
Hey, Summer. Good. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am good. It's been a bumpy morning for me, so I'm hoping our conversation will help smooth everything out. So let's create that energy for ourselves.
Yeah, let's
Um,
set that intention.
I'm super happy to talk with you because I think you're going to have some really interesting ways of looking at power and our scarcity thoughts around it, our limited thinking around it. I think a lot of people are actually really, really scared of power. They say, I want to be empowered. But when they're given that power, they say, oh my God, now I have to be seen. Now I'm going to potentially get, chopped off with the legs. Oh, that's a terrible thought. But you know what I mean? Like, there's this really weird relationship we have. And this is what you're all about. So why don't you just start riffing on that?
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the ways in which we limit ourselves.
Mhm.
You're right. Most of us have an ambivalent relationship to power. We're conflicted about it. We want it. There's a part of it that wants it, and there's a part of us that's afraid of it. And I think at the core of it, what we're afraid is that we might abuse it. And no
Mm.
wonder. Like, all we got to do is turn on the news on any given day and
Yeah.
witness at least one abuse of power. Add to the mix the fact that we've been conditioned to think power is a bad thing, it's a negative thing, right? How many times have we heard power corrupts? Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So what good-hearted person wants to be corrupted? And we don't really want to be abusive. So add to that mix the fact that we've all been conditioned to make the emotions weakness, right? We've labeled the emotions weakness. We're afraid of the emotions. We're afraid of losing control. We run away from conflict. We hate confrontation. When you put all that together, what happens, right? We end up giving away our power and settling for less. We end up playing small. And for the saddest and most tragic part about it is that we do that. What we're settling for is like an illusion of security, a false sense of acceptance, and morsels like crumbs of pseudo love. So it's not an effective strategy any way you look at it.
Yeah. But I think a lot of us have grown up with a lot of negative examples of power, right? Yes, it's all around us. And we look at people like, in government and so forth in power, but then we've been victims of the, dominant, powerful person. And our reaction was, I will never be like that. But like, where
Right.
are positive examples of power? Like, I guess I'm asking, how do you cultivate a new relationship with it?
Yeah, and what's important to know too is that we weren't given all the information. Like Lord Acton's quote about power corrupts.
Hmm.
What they didn't tell us about it is that he was speaking specifically about political power, not about interpersonal, about personal power.
Yeah.
And so what's important for us to know is that there is a way that we can step into our power that is a match for who we are, that doesn't
Mhm.
require for us to push anybody down, step on them, abuse them. It doesn't require power by force, by fear, by pushing somebody down, by stepping on them, by putting our knee to their neck, in order for us to prop ourselves up and feel powerful. So the first step is realizing that there are different kinds of power, and that we can find an expression of it that is a match for who we are, that is congruent with the inherent goodness in our hearts.
So, power, in other words, that doesn't hurt others, nor will it risk hurting ourselves. Because
Right.
I think a lot of times you feel like I am not going to have that conversation. I am not going to go into conflict. I will be disliked if I stand up. I will be disliked if I'm the whistleblower. I'll be disliked if I tell my partner what I really think of that behavior. Or my friends will turn against me. I don't know. I think that's a lot of it too. We're afraid that if we hold that, that everyone's going to look at us and kind of, mosey away.
Yeah.
Do you see
Yeah.
that? Maybe this is a feminine thing. I don't know.
No, no, no. It's we all have that, and disliked is a soft word to describe it. We're afraid of worse than that. We're afraid of rejection. We're
Being
afraid of
fired.
failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's stronger than dislike with the fear. So it's understandable how we do it, but it's unnecessary. Like so again, there is a way that we can step into power that is a match for who we are. So one of the ways that I start to speak about that is
Mhm.
that there are different kinds, right? So there's worldly power or egoic power, power that comes
Mhm.
from the way that the world thinks of it, or that comes from the ego. And
Mhm.
so those are, we tend to think of people who have money, people who are famous, people who are high up in some
Mhm.
kind of hierarchy, whether it's a corporate ladder or any kind of other institution. So we think about, that's how we tend to think of powerful people. But the thing about all those expressions of it is that they're external, right? They're outside of us. So by definition, then they're here today, gone tomorrow. Whereas the other kind of power that I'm talking about, spiritual power, soulful power, is inherent. It's inside each one of us. And like I said earlier, nobody can give it to us. Nobody can take it away. We are the only ones who give it away. And so, whereas worldly power is, it always has an agenda. It's always trying to grab something for itself. It comes from a misunderstanding, a belief that power is a zero sum game, so that you're having power takes away from mine. So then I'm going to do everything possible to make sure that you don't have power. Whereas the truth is that if I'm comfortable in my power, like, I can handle you. I celebrate you being in your power, right? I want everybody to be in power. I can handle whatever comes my way when I'm coming from that place of personal empowerment.
Mhm.
That soulful power is also, it's humble. It's more about service. And it doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. It just is. And it is actually more powerful. So think about a Gandhi or a Gandalf, from the Lord of the Rings, in their simple monastic robes, their sandal feet. And you would never know how much power they hold until it's needed. And then watch out. Like Gandhi brought the British Empire to its knees when it was at its highest point in terms of global reach without ever shooting a gun or landing a single punch. That's power.
Mhm. Yeah. And you mentioned Soulful Power. Of course, that is your website, soulfulpower
Yeah.
.com. So anybody just want to throw that in there. And I, of course, said it in the beginning as well. But uh, this Soulful Power, can you give me like a practical way, like you can just start to step into it? Or I don't know, maybe for you, like what made you decide one day, I don't have the power I want? What do I do about it?
It's that's a really interesting question, because I'm an unlikely person to be speaking about power. I was raised my first 10 years of life in a communist country. I immigrated from Cuba with my family. So, most people listening to this will know that in an autocratic, totalitarian regime,
Yeah.
it's like there's very little, if any, personal power. Like the government, the state pretty much owns you and everything about you, and tells you what to do and what you can and can't do. I was also raised in a very Catholic environment, which is another very hierarchical power over, in which you're told what to believe and what's right and what's wrong, and there's no deviation from that.
Yeah.
And for me, it was. Here's one of the things that inspired my thinking about this is my I'm one of 9 kids, so further evidence that of my Catholic family, and all of us buried together,
Yeah.
like all within 9 years. And my older sister, who's the oldest, I'm the second oldest. She was a natural born leader. Like growing up, she would tell all 9 of us, all 8 of us what to do, not only boss all of us around, but the entire neighborhood of like 15 kids, 20 kids. And very naturally, like she would say, "Hey, let's go do that." And we would just say, "Yeah, let's go do that." She was like that natural kind of leadership qualities. When she hit puberty, she shut that thing down. I don't know what happened. I don't know whether somebody said something to her, whether she just took it on from osmosis that women didn't behave this way and turned it off. And so that always kind of stayed in the back of my mind about how tragic that is. And a few years ago, I had sent a book proposal to a literary agent that I was working with at the time in New York, and she said, "Yeah, I want to work with you, but I want to see." It was on a different subject, and she said, "I want to see some of those marketing plans because you're supposed to, as you know, having worked for Hay House,
Yeah.
a book proposal is like a
Yeah.
marketing plan too. It's like who's the audience and how you're going to reach them and why are you the one to write this book, blah blah blah." So
Yeah.
to
Why should
implement
they
that,
care?
right, exactly. So implementing that marketing plan would have taken me a year. So it was like, putting on the brakes. I was spending the advance in my mind, and it kind of sent me into this crisis for a few days. And it was like, all right, if if I weren't going to write for an advance, what would I really want to write about? And a month before that, for only the second time in my life, now it's happened three, but that was only the second time where I actually heard audible words sitting in meditation. And the words were the soul of power. I got up, I got the URL, and forgot about it. And so, in
Oh,
this 3 days of crisis point, like, what will I really write about? Then it was one of those, like, palm of the hand to the forehead moments. Because I've been saying for years that the single most important thing that needs to happen in the world is the empowerment of women. And it's not to make put women up on a pedestal. It's not about giving women more crap to have to clean up this mess that we're all in. It's because as a species we're so out of balance in terms of power between the genders, and when women are in 50% of power in this world, we're going to have a very different relationship to war and poverty and hunger and wealth distribution and social justice and healthcare and how we treat the environment and all of it. So it was like women's empowerment, the soul of power is like, duh, hello. How do we step into power in a different way? Like that again is not this patriarchal power over model, but is it more like a power with way of relating to power? And that's when I started really brewing the idea for this book.
that's beautiful. Power over versus power with. If you see me taking notes, it's because every now and then you're saying something and I'm like, yes, I love this. I'm going to return to that later. Um, as a teacher then, like what you're trying to do is give people like a blueprint for new ways of relating to each other. It feels like in every area, like power with in your family, power with um, in your community, power with uh, in yourself,
Yep.
right? I mean, there's layers of this, and I
Yes.
think most of
Yes.
us know instinctively which ones we are the weakest in.
Yeah.
You might be powerful in your community, but power within your own family dynamic, you might be like, no, I don't say what I need to say, or I don't take time for myself. I don't give to me. I only give to the family, etc. So I don't know. Do you see that in people? Am I
Absolutely. And
target?
that's one of the questions that I always ask in retreats. And in this year long coaching program that I've launched, because it's like we were talking about before. First step is becoming aware, right? Developing
Mhm.
self-awareness. What do we think about power? Where do we get those beliefs from? Do I really want to buy those beliefs? What are
Yeah.
the behavior patterns? Why do I do the things I do? Why do I sabotage my relationships in a way that sometimes it feels that it's the same boring movie just with a different actor, with a different lead. But I've been here before, right? Repeating the same old pattern. So the first step, I think, towards freedom and to personal empowerment, and to stop
Yes.
limiting ourselves is awareness, right? So part of it, one of the questions
Hmm.
is like, in what type of situations do I tend to give my power away? Like for most of us, it's in romantic,
Excellent.
intimate, sexual relationships. For others, it's with authority figures, people that we identify as authority figures,
Hmm.
parental figures, bosses, ministers,
Hmm.
rabbis, that kind of thing, coaches. For others, is it in situations where our survival is at stake? So really important. That's another great practice to take on, is to start observing ourselves, and it's like, where is it that I give away my power and I end up saying yes when inside I really feel no. But for all the reasons that we were talking about before, all those expressions of fear, we override that and we put on a fake smile and we say yes, which
When you
doesn't
do
work.
then, yeah, no, it doesn't. It just kind of grinds you down to a little pulp, I think, especially if you've been
Yeah.
doing that your whole life. And pardon me, my kitty, I didn't realize she was in here. So I just unceremoniously dumped her back on the floor. I will try to keep her there.
I'm glad that we were blessed by her presence.
um, I know that whenever I push myself to do something where I think people are not everybody's going to like what I say, or I'm going to disappoint somebody. I'm trying to think of other circumstances, but those two come to mind immediately. I can feel this little like stuckness in me where I say, "No, you've got to do this. You've got to risk this. It's for you." Then why does it feel so bad if it's for me?
It's that conditioning, and
Mhm,
it's the guilt, and
mhm.
we've been conditioned to believe that if we really shined as bright as we could be, if we really stepped into our power,
Yeah.
that is arrogance.
Mhm.
Whereas, paraphrasing Marianne Williamson, it's like, it's the opposite, is to play small, to hide our light under a bushel. That's the arrogance. How dare we play small at this particular time, in the evolution of humanity, where it's
Yeah.
pretty much all hands on deck, right? We're needed, all of us, and that means all of us who feel this calling to do something, to show up as teachers and healers in this critical time,
Yeah.
of all hands on deck, and to show up, all of us, completely, not half-assed, but
Yes.
full-assed, like really bringing all of who we are to the
Yeah.
yes,
Yes.
to the game, because it's critical. The planet will be fine. It might take a few million years. Life will
Mhm.
find its balance. Life will find homeostasis. Probably
Mhm.
consciousness will continue to unfold. Maybe it turns out to be an enlightened cockroach planet. Who knows? Whether we make it, hmm, right? Like, that's the
Well,
question.
I'm hoping the whales will take over if we somehow fail. I'm gonna root for them.
Well,
That's
that's
or the
yeah, that would be
octopus.
great. That would be great. But those, because of the environmental situation, like, they're at risk
Yeah,
as well.
I know.
Um, and so, because we're just now witnessing whatever it is that we have unleashed on the environment, of which COVID is a symptom, right? COVID is a symptom of our relationship to nature. So it's a wake up call, and without minimizing the tragedy of it, and all the death and all the suffering and all the loss of the impact on the economy, etc. If we pay attention to what it's trying to tell us, there's important messages for us to hear, and incredible opportunities
Yeah,
for us to shift the way we're thinking, the way we're doing things, and the way we're thinking.
and prioritizing, right. Um, I wanna go back to what you mentioned a little bit ago about feminine power. I don't think you mean just women. I think you mean a more relationship to the femininity of power, the width, as opposed to the over. Um,
Yes.
how does how would a man sort of embrace feminine power?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? Because it's a little bit of a mind f, right? something
Yeah.
that the mind doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't
It's
quite
okay.
know
I
what
can
to
mark this
do.
explicit. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's important for men to step and to learn about feminine power.
Hmm.
And you're right. It's absolutely right. We're talking about energetics. We're not talking
Yeah.
about, you know, the XY chromosomes or the chromosomal differences or whatever's between our legs and what we do with that. Right? We're talking about the energies that we all have access to. The whole universe is masculine and feminine. So all those energies are reflected in us too. And that's part of the tragedy of it that we have made for the last several thousand years of patriarchy. We've turned the feminine into something weak, into something helpless even. And it's like, wait a minute, you want to talk power? Let's talk about the power of creation that lies in a feminine body, in a woman's body. It's like, wow. And I'm not going to do her any justice because there's nobody could say it like Betty White, but I love the story that they were having some kind of conversation about courage and having balls, and she goes, "Wait a minute, let's think about that because if how do we start thinking about that? Because if you thump those little things, the guy's bent over and collapses in pain. You
Yeah.
want to talk courage? Let's talk vaginas. Those things can take a pounding."
Christian. All right, you take the cake for going there in the series. That's funny. But you're so
Yeah.
right. I mean, literally, and babies, and yeah, I mean that's what they're made for. They're little punching bags. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how does a man do this, right? Because it's critically important for men too. This
Yeah.
patriarchal system of toxic masculinity is not working
Mhm.
for anybody, including men. So
Mhm.
let's look at some numbers quickly. The rate of suicide in the US.
Oh man.
Men commit suicide 4 times as frequently.
Yeah.
70% of the suicides in this country are committed by middle-aged white men. Interesting,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
because those are really the ones that have been holding on to power in the traditional way that we think about it. Longevity: women outlive men by 5 years in this country. Globally, by 7 years. So what's up with that? Why is that happening? Why is the system not working for men? And I think part of it is because we've gotten this twisted interpretation of what it means to be a man, and you cannot feel because that's weakness,
Mhm.
and then you got to walk around like this, like a robot, like an unfeeling robot,
Feminine,
because anything else would
supposedly.
be girly. And there's a price to pay for that, right? There's a price to pay. The emotions aren't good, they're not bad, they're not strength, they're not weakness, they're just energies coursing through our body.
Yeah.
When we stuff them is when we get into trouble,
Yeah.
because those, we know from physics, energy cannot be destroyed. So just because we stuff those energies, they don't go away. They get stuck in the tissues of our body. And after years and decades of stuffing our emotions, we walk around with layers upon layers of repressed emotional crap. And here we are trying to have a relationship in the present, and it's all getting filtered through that lifetime of unhealed past trauma and repressed emotions. Yikes.
Yeah.
I don't know how any relationships can work because we haven't been taught how to approach them and how to clear ourselves from all this emotional crap. And
Yeah.
when we suppress them, only two things can happen. Either we suppress the emotion, and then the next unfortunate one rubs us the wrong way and we explode
Yeah.
inappropriately, volcano, right? And we cause harm to our relationships, sometimes irreparably. Or
Mhm.
that energy has to come out one way or the other. That's one thing we know from physics now. Everything is energy, including the body, including the emotions, and energy cannot be destroyed. So when we suppress it and don't give it expression, don't find a way to express it, it starts seeping out, showing up in physical symptoms: cancer, heart attacks,
Mhm.
ulcers. So we've all got to have to get on top of this and learn how to feel our emotions and express them. And to do that courageously is the opposite of weakness. It is nothing less but mastery, right? To learn how to feel and how to communicate what we're feeling responsibly and courageously and gracefully in a way that they can be heard. So nothing short of mastery and nothing short of heroic. So it's the opposite of what we have labeled them.
Huh. Yes. When you start working with someone, And let's say, you work with people, coach them and teach them, and do you start with this idea of, look, let's grow your power? Where are you powerless? And what are these emotions? Is that like one of the first ways you dig into it? Like, let's get the emotions moving and processed, and then we're going to build on that? Or what's your technique?
Yeah,
I mean,
there's
broadly, what's your technique? I know
yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
well, I
yeah,
could talk for 5 days on that, but you know.
yeah. Well, I do a lot of retreats and events on different themes. How
Hmm.
to do relationships consciously, how to step into our power in a different
Hmm.
way, life purpose, living heroically. Consistent to all of them are two things. One is breathwork as a healing modality, because I've yet to come across anything that heals as profoundly and as quickly as that does. The other thing that I always include and that is critical in terms of understanding why we do the things we do and why we have limiting beliefs, because it is the largest limiting belief, right? So that's understanding what the ego mind is. And we don't have the time here to really get into it, but here's a quick image
Yeah.
of it, so that to help us all understand it, because there's a lot of confusion about what the ego is. But here's a simple visual.
Hmm.
If you put a baseball in the center of a stadium, that's the ego. Who we are is actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny,
Hmm.
tiny, tiny part of who we are to think that it is all of who we are, and to make some critical, consequential choices about our lives, about what we do, about our jobs, about professions, about where we live, about our relationships, how long we stay, whether to start another one. We make all these big choices from its very small and always fear based perspective. So if we want to stop, like, if we want to talk limiting beliefs, that's the first step, right? Beginning to disidentify with a baseball and re-identify with a
Hmm.
stadium.
Mm, I love that. It harkens back to Dr. Wayne Dyer. I mean, he was Mr. talking about the ego. I mean, that was so much of the focus was there. And I always wondered, why exactly? Why? Um, so I'm really curious, like, if I could follow up with another hour with you, Kristen, I would ask you, tell
Oh
me
my
more
God.
about how this thing is just getting in the way of everything.
I
But
know, but it's critical. If we want to have
yeah,
relationships that work, if we want to have
yeah,
that sense of personal empowerment and meaning, we've got to get it, because that is the
yeah.
source of all our problems. That it is, and it's a confusion in identification, right? We think we're one thing, we're actually another. And if we think about the Latin name for us, Homo sapiens sapiens, one way we can translate that is humans who know that we know, right? So we have that ability to reflect back upon ourselves, which is what makes us so smart and so effective. As far as we know, we're the only species that has a sense of self, right? Like a sense of personal individual identity. This is Christian, that's Summer, right? Ultimately, illusion, both a leap in consciousness and evolution, and the source of all our suffering. So, really critical that we understand how it works, how it keeps us in a self made prison of fear, self doubt, limitation, limiting beliefs, so that we can let ourselves out, because nobody else can let us out. Only we can let ourselves out of that prison.
I'm sure all of this you go into detail in your book, right?
Yeah, probably
Awakening the Soul of Power.
the first quarter of,
Okay.
maybe even third of the book is all about understanding the ego.
Okay. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, you speak right to the heart of, one of my personal beliefs, which is, without inner power, there's really that's the starting point for everything that you want to make. I mean, manifesting, co-creating. I always tell people you're going to manifest tiny little dinky things unless the part of you inside is big enough to hold the bigger things. I'm like, it all starts with this, and then you can do all that.
right.
But Christian, we're kind of wrapping up, and I know people want to, find out more about you, and you have some free things for them where they can kind of explore your ideas a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, we have in terms of the book, it's available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, your local bookstore, if you want to support them. Um, in terms of getting in touch with me, probably best way is my website, soulfulpower.com. And we have, I guess, an offer going on now that if they sign up to be on our email list, they'll get a chapter from the book. They'll get some power practices that are designed to apply the teachings of the book to our lives, right? So that it doesn't stay at the
Ooh, I
level of
love those.
information and it actually becomes transformation, right? So that our lives can actually change in positive, profoundly positive ways. And then they'll also get a recorded guided meditation about trust, which is so important for all of us right now in these times of chaos and uncertainty. Like, where are we gonna place our trust, and how do we do that?
I love this. Yes. So you're going to take it from the ideas we discussed to now here's what you can do with it and kind of dig deeper into it. So we'll have that link also with the video or the audio. However you're listening to this right now, you'll be able to get a link to go to that page to get those pieces from you.
Beautiful.
Well, Christian, thank you so much. Pleasure, delight getting to know you, and you speak to my own heart. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Summer. I love our connection, and I love the depth of the conversation, and I look forward to more. And thanks for doing all you do. It really makes a difference.
Thank you.